Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Maybe because I've just finished watching all the episodes of Turning Point, the Netflix documentary on how 9/11 happened and then the so-called war on terror began, etc., leading up to the US withdrawal or retreat or defeat in Afghanistan. Maybe because I'm influenced by that I am turning attention again to Afghanistan and what's happening there. But there are a couple of other indicators, and I think these are straws in the wind, but we should not miss them. So first of all, there is a tweet from Bilal Sarbari. Bilal Sarbari is an analyst, also respected journalist based in Toronto, who has tweeted, and see that tweet, who has said that many soldiers of the Afghan National Defense Forces, that's the Afghan army essentially, particularly from the special forces, because all they know is how to fight as professional soldiers. They don't like the Taliban, maybe the Taliban don't like them. So they are sort of at a loose end, and maybe they are now finding refuge, or they are finding a place to go to, or a go-to place with the Islamic State of Khorasan, Pakistan, that is ISKP. Now, is that happening? He mentions some cases, some number, a small number, but he says more of this is happening in provinces of Laghman, Zabul, Faryab. And if you see that timeline, lots of other people who seem well informed on Afghanistan mention similar events elsewhere. So something of that has begun to happen. Along with that, we see this story in Time magazine by W.J. Hennigan, who's Time magazine's national security correspondent who covers the Pentagon. And he's not giving you his theories and his own personal fundas. He's quoting from a congressional hearing. This is Colin Kahl, who's the Undersecretary of Policy at Department of Defense, the Pentagon, giving his testimony to Senate Armed Forces Committee. And there he also talks about the possibility of ISIS-KP being ready to attack American interests within 6 months to a year. And then he says Al-Qaeda maybe will take a little longer than that. So now even the Americans have begun to worry about what they might have left behind. Now the reason I said looking at this documentary, Turning Point, made me focus on this was that even there you could see that every point when things have eased up a bit, you can see that the Americans and their Western allies, they've looked the other way, pretending that the problem is over. The problem comes back and they go back, they walk back in the same trap. And what is the trap? The trap is how to go and fight these guys in a distant land, mostly Afghanistan, but we've seen some of this happen in Syria and other places as well later. How do we find these people there? You need a local ally, which in this case mostly becomes Pakistan. So once again, you think that Pakistan helped the Taliban defeat you. You think you lost to Pakistan. That came out very clearly when Wendy Sherman, the Deputy Secretary of State, visited the subcontinent. And her statements in India and her statements in Pakistan, you contrast them, they made it very clear that the Americans are sullen with Pakistan. At the same time, you now have a situation where, once again, Colin Kahl has told the Senate Armed Forces Committee that the US and Pakistan are looking at some kind of an agreement whereby the US could get more formalized access to Afghanistan for operations. Of course, the Pakistanis have denied it, but from all evidence, it looks like a new deal of the same kind, a new version of maybe the oldest deal in the region may once again be coming about. Now, where exactly is everybody coming from? Now, let's look at Colin Kahl's testimony. He says we could see ISIS-K or ISIS-KP generate that capability of attacking American interests somewhere within 6 to 12 months, and for Al-Qaeda maybe a year or two. For clarity, we should know that Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K do not work together. For now, they are enemies. Al-Qaeda has been a friend of the Taliban. They are still friends of the Taliban. Taliban are not betraying them. They are also not sort of turning over Al-Qaeda leaders to the Americans or anybody for that matter. They are saying we'll make sure Al-Qaeda will be of no trouble to you. So Al-Qaeda and ISIS are not together, but in these situations, people walk from one side to the other. Now there is a background and recent history to this. And what is the recent history? The recent history is that when the Americans came into Iraq, that happened almost simultaneously with Afghanistan. In fact, even if you see this documentary, it tells you that the big blunder George Bush made was going into Iraq with that complete fake idea that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which was completely proved to be untrue and farcical. Right? In fact, that also blights Colin Powell's legacy. Colin Powell just passed away. So when the Americans came in there, they broke the system there. The system in Iraq was that a Sunni elite. Now Sunnis are the minority in Iraq. The Sunni elite, led by Saddam Hussein, his own group, his own coterie, which was for a long time called the Tikriti Mafia, because Tikrit is the hometown from which many of them came. They were mostly Sunni, his generals were mostly Sunni, and the key people in his armed forces were mostly Sunni, particularly generals, commanders, special forces, armored forces, tank commanders, etc. Now, the Americans came in, they broke that system, they got rid of Saddam Hussein, and they got rid of the Sunni control over the power structure. And then they brought in democracy. As they brought in democracy, then in democracy, majorities win. So Shias got the power through democracy. Once that happened, these old Sunni elites, or what were also defined as Baathists, because Baath was the ideological party that backed Saddam Hussein. And these old Baathists found themselves at a loose end, frustrated, suffering a loss of power, and also getting victimized. So they lock, stock and barrel and fighter and tank and artillery gun and everything, they walked across to the other side. That is ISIS there. That's how ISIS came in control of Mosul, which is an important economic and political city in Iraq, and took a lot of area. So that is how ISIS acquired its army. So this fear now is that the jetsam and flotsam of the Afghan army, which doesn't know what to do, where to go, they feel victimized, their families feel threatened, they may see no option, or enough of them may see no option but to go to ISIS, KP, and start fighting the Taliban. Now Taliban themselves are making out an outreach to these people to say, look, we are just setting up a system, come back, your jobs will be secure in the army. So I'm not saying nobody will go there, it's possible that quite a few will go there, but how many does it take going towards, say, ISIS to make a big difference? It's a couple of hundred people, and chances are it may be more than a couple of hundred people, particularly as there will be regional variations, province to province. So once again, look at Colin Carl's testimony. He says, we are actually fairly certain that the Taliban have the intention to prevent Al-Qaeda and ISIS, etc., from coming up and attacking us. But we are not quite sure that they have the capability. Now, how will the Americans handle it then? So they are looking at over the horizon capability, but over the horizon capability also has limitations, because you are not sending a nuclear weapon or an ICBM over the horizon. You want a pinpointed attack on 2 guys hiding someplace, or maybe 10 guys hiding someplace, etc. So for that, you need to be somewhere in proximity, even if it's over the horizon. So they've looked at Tajikistan. Now Tajikistan has an issue. Tajikistan has just made an agreement with the Chinese to give them a large military base, and in return for rent for that place, they will also take, they will take their rent in kind from the Chinese. Tajikistan is also a country where India has a base of sorts, an air base of sorts. So how do the Americans take a base there? Americans have tried in Uzbekistan. So Wendy Sherman, again, when she came for a tour of the region, she went to Uzbekistan. She met the Uzbek president, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, on quote unquote the way forward in Afghanistan. So what is the way forward in Afghanistan that you are discussing with Uzbekistan, which is a next door neighbor of Afghanistan, in fact from the Mazar-e-Sharif side, from that side of the northern borders, very crucial, because that's where the highway then to Central Asia and right up to Russia goes, and that is from where Russian forces have first entered, and the last Russian tank left, right? That is the bridge over the river Termez. So she was in Uzbekistan, but much as it's tempting to find bases in those places, those countries have limitations because those countries are still strongly under the Russian influence, and the Russians don't like the Americans setting up bases there. So what option is Americans left with? The only option they are left with, they can't go to China. The only option they are left with is Pakistan. So right now they are carrying out drone attacks from Al Dhafra, drone attacks or drone surveillance from Al Dhafra air base in UAE. Now again, it's far, and from there also the drones can't take the shortest possible route to get over to reach all parts of Afghanistan, because they have to skirt Iran. Iran and America are enemies, so they have to skirt Iran. They have to stealthily go over Pakistan and get into Afghanistan. Now this so far is being done by stealth. Pakistan doesn't acknowledge it. Americans don't announce it, but it's going on because there is no other way these drones could be going into Afghanistan. So once again, Carl tells the Senate Armed Forces Committee that the Pakistanis are letting us do it, but Pakistanis want a more formal arrangement where Pakistanis also get something in return in the bargain. When you look at that, then you know that you are now going back, and the Americans now are again looking at going back to the same situation. The same situation that they had come to quote unquote remedy in 2001 with Pakistan's help, and where Pakistan defeated them. They again want to remedy the same situation with the help of Pakistan because they seem to have no choice. Now, Colin Carl also says that what's happened in Afghanistan now, the victory of Taliban, will have a galvanizing effect on Islamic fighters everywhere. And chances are that many of them would again come to Afghanistan because Taliban, even if they intend to stop them, may not be able to do so. And he says, we know that Afghanistan want to stop them. And he says, again I'm quoting from him, from his testimony, we know that Taliban want to stop them, quote, not because they are good guys, that is not because the Taliban are good guys, but because they fear retribution might occur, right? But can they do it? That is the question, because Afghanistan is such a terrain and it is so confused, and the loyalties, it's so poorly governed, tribal loyalties crisscross, so you can't say who's with whom or against whom or will turn which way. In that slippery area, his point is that America can't be sure and America has reasons to worry. Now see, on the other hand, what has this ISIS KP, ISIS Khorasan Pakistan been doing to make its presence felt? So 26th of August, that is 5 days before the last American soldiers had left. I think the last one left on the 30th of August. They carried out this big attack at Kabul airport that killed at least 170 people, including a bunch of US servicemen, right? And then US says that carried out some reprisal raids. We don't know what happened there, but they carried it out while the US was still there. In fact, they forced the Americans to cause some collateral damage to Afghan people, innocent Afghan people, when the Americans got the dodgy intelligence and bombed somebody's house, a family's house, and wiped out the family. And it was the family of an aid worker. It was not a family of an Islamic State terrorist. Now, how is it that Taliban are going to handle this challenge? There is an article that I will share with you from Asfandyar Mir, who is a very respected scholar, and this is an article on US Institute of Peace, USIP website, on the Asia section. Now, what's happened after that? After that, the ISIS people sort of calmed down for a few weeks, and then in October, they've come back with a vengeance. So 8th of October, the big attack on the mosque in Kunduz, that is a Syed Abdul Mosque, killing at least 63 people. This is a Shia mosque. The important thing is they are targeting Shias and Shia mosques. Then on October 15, they attacked the Bibi Fatima Mosque in Kandahar, again on a Friday. Both mosque attacks were on Fridays, and these were Shia mosques. And after that, they issued a statement, and they said that we are going to target Shias in their homes and their centers, and quote from their statement, and in their words, quote, in every way, from slaughtering their necks to scattering their limbs. And the news of ISIS attacks in the temples of the Shia, see the language, in the temples of the Shia, because they don't consider Shia to be sufficiently Islamic. In the temples of the Shia and their gatherings is not hidden from anyone, from Baghdad to Khorasan. So they delivered this message. Now the fact is, this also causes a problem for the Taliban, because Taliban today say that they want to protect the Shias, but they've never been friends of the Shia. In fact, they've carried out massive killings and atrocities against the Shias, especially the Hazara. And even after their return to power in Kabul, atrocities against the Hazara have carried on. So there's also a report from Human Rights Watch which mentions this, and where Patricia Gosman, who is a formidable Human Rights Watch worker for a very long time. In fact, I used to know her in early 90s when she was campaigning over human rights violations in our Kashmir, right? And I had some sparring matches with her also at some conferences and seminars. I do respect her. You can respect people you disagree with. She is a very formidable human rights activist, and she has said that, look, the atrocities on Hazara community have always been there, and now they've really gone up. So once again, now are the Americans going back 20 years? Exactly, so going back to 2001. So slowly, once again, global terrorist organizations, whether they are Al-Qaeda or they are some form of ISIS, they start finding safe harbors in Afghanistan and growing from there, because around Afghanistan is very challenging country for anybody who wants to control it, including the great Pakistani army. I say the great Pakistani army and the ISI, the quote-unquote #1 spy agency in the world, which has defeated the KGB and CIA now, right? It's very difficult for anybody to control those border areas. So as the Americans now face these tough choices, do they go back in time to 2001 or pre 2001 period, or are there other options available? Because there is no love lost for Pakistan, there is no love lost for the Taliban. At the same time, what do? If you want somebody to control or to keep Afghanistan clean from your point of view, you need the Taliban there. And if you need to operate there, you need Pakistani airspace and maybe more help than airspace. You're going back to having Pakistan as your client state, or maybe becoming Pakistan's client state. And that is a choice the Americans have to make. And I hope they read writings like Javed Ahmed. Javed Ahmed is a former Afghan diplomat. He was Afghan ambassador to UAE. He writes an article in Wall Street Journal, which I am sharing with you, where he says that, look, Pakistan has followed a dual track policy in Afghanistan. That is helping the Americans in fighting the Taliban, at the same time harboring the Taliban. And in this article, he traces how Pakistani policy has moved back and forth depending on how the Americans have got more interested in fighting, more interested in peace, or completely indifferent. Because as the Americans got indifferent after Doha, Pakistan even walked back from the promises it might have made about bringing about a certain kind of agreement in Doha, and just waited for the Taliban victory. So now Pakistan holds all the cards. And he mentions some very interesting things that have happened. He says the Ghani government was always of the belief that a settlement in Afghanistan could only happen through Pakistan. So Ghani government was talking to the Pakistanis a great deal. So there was a time when the Pakistanis came to Afghanistan and said that, look, you want to build trust, you let us post an ISI, Pakistan ISI liaison team in Afghanistan, in Kabul and other key places, because we have concerns about what the Indians are doing. So Ghani responded, yes, it's a good idea, I will do it, but only if you let one of my intelligence liaison teams also similarly operate in Pakistan, so they know what's going on, and for both of us to be sure to trust each other and to know that we are being honest, we can have the British overseeing this arrangement, right? These are revelations made by Javed Ahmed in his Wall Street Journal article. So in this case, General Bajwa said no. After that, Pakistan, he says, began building the fence on the Durand Line. Now, Durand Line we've spoken about in the past. That is the border drawn by an imperialist power, the British power, Sir Mortimer Durand, who represented Imperial Britain, but also had enormous control over the foreign and security powers and diplomacy of Afghanistan. So he drew this line as the border between the two countries, which Afghans have never accepted. So Pakistan has been building a fence on that border, which means the fence will become a de facto border. So he, in fact, General Bajwa reached out to Ghani and said that, look, you in a way start building this fence with us, also pay some expense for building the fence. Now Ghani, he might have been whatever, but nobody is so stupid as not to know that once you start doing it, then this is a de facto acceptance of the Durand line. That is what Ghani was not willing to do. So in this case, Ghani said no. So two near deals, each side offered the other, which was rejected first by the Pakistanis, that is the intelligence liaison teams, and second time by the Afghans, by Ghani, that is jointly building the fence on the Durand line. So now you have a situation which has changed radically for Pakistan in their favor, at least strategically and tactically, which is that Afghanistan today under the Taliban, for all practical purposes, is their client state, if not a colony. It is also true in this reality that Americans are worrying now about what may be sprouting in Afghanistan or growing there, and these concerns about the Afghan soldiers, sort of demobilized, demobbed Afghan soldiers, particularly from special forces, enough of them going into Islamic State groups is now worrying them. But if they have to operate, they need Pakistan. So once again, we are a little bit looking like getting back to square one. But let us hope that something will be done now, some correctives will be taken before we witness, God forbid, another turning point.